So my name's Jenny Fitzharding and I will be facilitating tonight. I'm a registered clinical counsellor and have been a family connections leader since 2015 and have been delivering DBT groups for adolescents and their carers since 2019. I first learned about validation when I was studying counselling back in 2007, and I tried it on a friend who I used to get into stupid arguments with all the time because I kind of perceived her stance on things to be illogical and unreasonable and all of these things, and I'd try to rationalise her out of her position. But once I learned how to validate, our relationship was absolutely transformed and I became a convert. So that's me. I'm going to throw to Cheryl. I think you will need to unmute yourself. Yep.
Yeah. Can you hear me now?
We can. Thank you.
Lovely. Hi, I'm Cheryl. I in my own life, I work in the arts industry and I also have a psychology degree, and I've recently become a family connections leader. I used to pride myself on being a really caring, sensitive person that people would talk to and share their problems with, and I felt that I was really good at all that. And then I had two fabulous children, both of whom turned out to, I think, have BPD. My daughter expressed a lot of anger, school refusal to do life, a lot of self-loathing. And I was really good at trying to help her, and that didn't make her feel very good at all. So this Family Connections program has helped me learn an enormous amount about what true support for someone who's in that sort of emotional anguish really is, and about validation, our favourite topic for the night.
Okay, thank you so much, Cheryl. And I'm going to throw to you, Phoebe, next.
Hi, I'm Phoebe. I'm 24 and I got diagnosed with BPD when I was 21 after struggling with my mental health for as long as I can remember. Validation has just really changed the game for me and my relationship with all of my friends and family. My previous relationship with someone who also had BPD became extremely abusive. We both struggled to manage our emotions. And as a result, I ended up acting out and being toxic towards my next partner, which made our relationship start off on the wrong foot. I knew I had to change for my own sake and for all the people I love, especially since all of my past relationships and friendships have been extremely unhealthy. And I just didn't want to keep repeating any of those harmful patterns that I had done my whole life. So I took some time to learn DBT skills to help me better manage my emotions. And before all of this, I experienced violent outbursts, extreme fear of abandonment, attention-seeking behavior, self-harm, impulsivity. I was just really lost. I couldn't maintain any of my friendships, and I got to a point where I could not even leave the house. I changed schools 7 times within 3 years. And now that I'm doing better, validation has just become extremely essential for me. When my friends and family recognize my feelings, it just helps me feel really understood and supported, which has strengthened all of my connections and made a huge difference in all of my recovery journey.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm really looking forward to hearing about your journey tonight.
Thank you.
And now I'm going to throw to Josh.
Thanks, Jenny. Hi, everyone, and welcome. Yeah, my name's Josh. I'm a mental health clinician in a community non-for-profit mental health service here in Southeast Queensland. I've also been a carer for my partner of 12 years who has a diagnosis of BPD. It's kind of what led me to the mental health field to begin with. So I tend to juggle multiple hats, which can be challenging at times. Prior to my role in the mental health field, I actually studied architecture, and that helped me to foster a critical and curious stance, which really helps me with validation, I find. It helps me to understand how we interact with the world around us and with each other as well. As some self-care outside of those times where I'm pretty stressed with work and sometimes in my relationship as well. I enjoy watching sport on the weekends with my family and playing as many Nintendo games as I can. In my work as a clinician, validation, I feel, is the essential foundation that helps me to collaborate with someone, not dictate to them, and be able to support someone on their change journey by building trust, connection, and understanding.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you so much. Liz, we can hear.
Hi, I'm Liz Hodgman. I'm a carer and a family connections leader since 2015, and I'm on NEA's steering committee. Validation, wow. My son and I were estranged for a period of 8 years, so things had been really awful before that and were very fraught. And when I did Family Connections, when Alan Prezzetti came out to Australia to teach it to the first lot of people, I realised there was a light bulb moment. And the thing that actually changed it for me was I realised that I had been validating first. Jake would get very upset and I would say something like, "I can see you're really angry, honey." And then I would say, "Can you let me make an appointment with a psychologist or somebody to help you?" And he just exploded. And I didn't understand why until I did Family Connections and appreciated that actually that was a judgment. I was saying, "I think I know what you should do." And from that day on, I've just not done that. And I've learned to listen more, and our relationship's now pretty terrific. So I'm very lucky.
That's really encouraging for a lot of people, I'm sure. And finally, Stan.
Hi, everyone. My name's Stan Rogers. I'm retired. I live in Singapore, but I'm the general manager for NEA BPD Australia. I joined a year ago, having reached out in my retirement to keep myself occupied. And ever since then, I've been so inspired of what Family Connections and all of our fabulous leaders, our panelists, do for people. And so it's my responsibility to make sure that I support the board's direction, my CEO, Megan Henderson, in her direction. But more importantly, it's my role to support all of our fantastic Family Connections leaders going forward. And I do that with the help of the likes of Liz and everybody else on this panel. So thank you very much. I am actually going to switch myself off in a second, and I'm going to help Liz with the chat, and I'll leave the panel and Jenny as a host to get on with it. So thank you.
Okay. Yeah. So just to be clear, Liz and Stan are going to be in if you post questions or comments or anything, or ask for resources or whatever, Liz and Stan will be in the chat answering those questions. And then what we will do is I'm going to just start with an explanation, a very quick sort of high view of what validation is, and then we're going to go to questions that were submitted on registration, and the panel are going to weigh in on those. And then if we've got time, we'll answer more questions if they're different from what we've already covered in the from the chat. All right, so I need to share screen. There's so much to validation. It's going to be oh, there it is. Quite. It really is a high overview. All right, so who needs to be validated? Every single one of us. Everybody needs to be validated. It works on everyone. We all need it. And most of all, we need to validate ourselves. Validation is such a big part of one of the most evidence-based forms of therapy for borderline personality disorder, which is dialectical behavior therapy. It's also a big part of Family Connections, which is based on DBT. So what's BPD? BPD describes people who are really highly sensitive. They feel emotions much more intensely, more rapidly, and for longer than many people, or perhaps most people. This can also describe people with other diagnoses such as ADHD, autism spectrum disorder, complex PTSD, anxiety, and depression. Whilst DBT was developed for BPD, it's also been proven to be effective with these other disorders as well. And because people with BPD can have these intense emotions that are greater than the norm and last for longer than the norm, people with BPD are often invalidated, and which further increases their emotional distress. So BPD has a biological basis to it. People with BPD are generally born much more sensitive to emotional stimuli. If they see the Bambi movie, they might, as a young child, they might have been inconsolable when the mum dies, whereas another child might have gone, oh, that's a bit sad, and then they're ready to carry on. So there's this high sensitivity to emotional stimuli. The reaction is very high, and then they have what we call a slow return to baseline. So very quickly, what this might look like is, let's say we have Ms. Green on the bottom line and Mr. Brown on the higher line. Their baselines, Ms. Green's really, she's always pretty calm, hard to get activated. Everything's pretty chill for her. Mr. Brown, on the other hand, is much more emotionally sensitive. He's more reactive. And this can look like, if they have the same experience, let's say they're driving to work and somebody pulls out in front of them and they have to brake, Ms. Green might go, oh gosh, that was a bit of a surprise. Oh, I'm okay, they're okay, everything's fine. Mr. Brown's like, oh my God, what's happened here? Why are people so dangerous on the road? I hate driving, the traffic's the worst. They're right up there. And then they keep feeling dysregulated. I wish I could remember how to adjust this graph, because they wouldn't actually come down as far as I've drawn it there. Whereas Ms. Green kind of gets back to baseline pretty quickly, because she can validate herself, she can name the emotions that she can feel, she's okay. Whereas Mr. Brown's still kind of dysregulated. Then let's say they spilled their coffee in the car. He's back up at the point that he was at when the person pulled out, after the person pulled out in front of him. So he's like, oh my God, this is always happening to me. Why am I, my life's such a mess. It's a big, big moment. Whereas Ms. Green's just like, oh, damn it, I'll have to clean that up when I get to work. And then they get to work, and let's say, a manager approaches both of them separately. Have you got that report? Ms. Green's like, oh, not quite, not yet, but it's okay. I'll get it to you, because she's regulated. Mr. Brown's still carrying the tension from the person pulling out in front of them and from spilling his coffee. So when he gets asked that question by the manager, he's angry. And then of course he's been validated by the manager by going, whoa, you're overreacting here. So, and the manager has no knowledge of what's happened at these previous two high points. So this kind of consistently happens for a lot of people with BPD, where they never really get that chance to come back down to baseline. And that's what we talk about when we talk about being in an invalidating environment. It doesn't have to be as, invalidation can be as dramatic as bullying, or it can just be being consistently misunderstood by people in your environment. Okay, so what is validation? Validation communicates that you're paying attention to the other person, that you're seeking to understand them. You're not focused on being right. You just want to understand what's going on for them, and that you can see what is valid in their emotions, thoughts, or actions. So, an example of that might be, let's say, your good friend has finally broken up with their partner who you couldn't stand. You thought that they were the worst possible partner for them. They were abusive. They were just awful. And you're like, don't let the door hit you on the way out. You're so happy. And they come to you and they're absolutely distraught about the ending of this relationship. What can you validate in that? Do you want to focus on the feeling that you have about being right, that it's a good thing that this person's gone? Or can you go, okay, what does it feel like to break up with someone, even if that person is not great? What does it feel like? It's disappointing. It's you haven't just lost the relationship. You've lost what you hoped that relationship would be. You're facing an uncertain future. So you can validate all of those things without saying, yeah, that person was fantastic and it's such a shame they're not in your life anymore. So that's an example of validation. So we validate by being non-judgmental. We validate by being curious, as Josh was saying. We're mindful of our own internal experience when we're validating, and we're mindful of the relationship. Is it more important for me to be right now, or is it more important for me to connect with the person I'm trying to understand? And we're repetitive. We keep trying, even if the first few attempts don't work. So how do we validate? We validate by paying attention. We give the person our full attention. We reflect back what they're saying, you know, to make sure that we are understanding what's being said or being communicated. We try and read minds. We don't make assumptions, but we try, you know, and pay attention to, you know, someone might say, oh, look, I'm not angry, I'm just sad. But we might notice that they've got clenched fists, that their jaw's tight, all of those sorts of things. So we're checking in on more than just the superficial. We seek to understand what they're feeling, thinking, and how that could make sense based on their experiences. So, you know, like the example I just gave. And we note the valid, you know, we look for what is valid in that. And we show equality. We don't put other people up on a pedestal, and we don't look down on them. We don't treat others as fragile or incompetent. So we don't rush in to fix. Oh my God, you're so upset about breaking up with him. Look, that's okay. We're going to get you on a dating site straight away. We can fix it. You know, there's so many fish in the sea. That's really invalidating. You know, and it can also be if someone is highly competent and we know that, you know, they're going to go and give a presentation at school. We know that they've prepared everything, that everything's going to be great, but they're like, oh, I'm really nervous. We don't go, you'll be fine, you're so great, you're the best, you know, even if that, in our opinion, might be true. We actually look at what they're feeling and go, hey, yeah, it's natural to be anxious. You know, and then you might be able to get in it, and I think you'll be fine. Okay. So what validation isn't? It's not, if you validate something, it doesn't necessarily mean that you agree with it. It's not condoning dangerous or ineffective behavior. It's not problem solving. You know, if you always fix things for someone else, then you're actually invalidating their capacity to solve their own, to live their own lives. It's not giving up or giving in, and it's not invalidating yourself in order to validate somebody else. And this, which brings us to self-validation, which is also really important. It can be really hard if we're being very much invalidated by somebody else to sort of, if we try to then validate them without actually validating ourselves first, without self-regulating, so that we can go, oh, okay, this is really distressing being in this situation with them. I'm feeling very confused. This is hard. That will bring your own emotional temperature down. And then you can start being mindful of the other person. So when we validate ourselves, we acknowledge our emotions. If you can name your emotion, you can tame it. We validate our efforts, that we're all doing the best we can, and maybe we can do better. And we acknowledge that when one person in a family is suffering, everyone's suffering. And we let go of shoulds. We accept the coulds of life, and we accept validation from others. For the purposes of the webinar, I've just got this on the screen quickly. We've got some validation shortcuts. I know is one. It sounds like it could be really invalidating, but used well, it can be very validating. This is important to you. I know you're really disappointed right now. I know that I can't feel what you're feeling, but I'm here for you. Of course, is another starter statement. Of course, you'd be upset if you thought everyone was ignoring you. On the example I used before, of course, it's disappointing to have a relationship end. Of course, you'd be worried about being alone for the rest of your life. Not you're going to be alone for the rest of the life. You're not agreeing with that. You're just saying it can feel that way when you first break up with someone. And a me too is, you know, I'm worried for you too. I hate fighting all the time too. What me too is most definitely not. Look, I've had a similar experience, so I know how you're feeling, you know, oh, well, yeah, well, when I broke up with that guy, you know, I was really down for a couple of months, but I got over it and you will too. That's really invalidating. So it's not that kind of me too. Okay, that's that. So anyone on the panel want to add any more that I might have just missed on that very quick overview, or should we just jump straight into the questions? Okay. All right. So the first question that we had, so these are not the verbatim questions. Many of the questions are quite similar, so we've just kind of summarized them into one question when they've been similar. So I might put this one to you to start off with, Cheryl. How do carers cast their own feelings aside when their person is invalidating them and then validate their person? And, you know, the invalidation might include accusations, name calling, and other kinds of misunderstandings.
Yeah, thanks, Jenny. It's certainly not easy, particularly when you are feeling blamed. And as the parent, you know, I know that for me with my daughter who could have quite volatile behavior, I was just desperate for her to be okay. And so when you're blamed and you feel as if you're trying to do everything you can, it really does wound you. And I had to learn a lot about the fact that the venting and the things that were being said were sort of secondary, and that actually inside was my little girl who was hurting. And yeah, it was me that she was attacking at the time, but the point was that she was hurting. And as I learned to, you know, take a deep breath and put my own sort of automatic reactions to being blamed aside, I could just ask her for how she was. And look, sometimes that's really hard because I could get a big stream of accusation about the way she was brought up and about my behaviors. And, you know, I had to be brave myself, I guess, to let it roll and to think she needs to get this out. She's in really heightened emotion right now. She needs to say this stuff. And there comes a point when it ends, or almost always, we would be in a better place, that there'd be a possibility for conversation and intimacy, but the big blast of emotion just had to come out somehow. And I tried to remind myself that as a mother, I was the person best placed to take the blame because, you know, she's my child. She's got a volcano of emotion inside her. She needs to let it out somehow, and I am her prime carer. So I sort of accepted that was my role and focused on my care and on listening rather than trying to judge and try to explain why she might not need to feel those things, because clearly she did feel those things, and just sort of sit with her and listen and be there for her.
Yeah. And Josh, you were saying that you've been in the clinician and the carer kind of role. What has worked for you in the past?
Yeah, I think it's really just an extension of what Cheryl was saying there, probably around, you know, when the question there kind of asks, how do you cast aside your own feelings or your own emotions? And I don't think you can do that, both with my carer hat on and in my clinician world as well. You know, human beings at heart have emotional reactions, maybe not in a similar rate to maybe what other people do, but we still have emotional reactions and we still have challenges and difficulties that arise, and we kind of do have to check in with ourselves first, notice that we're having an emotional reaction ourselves to maybe the blame that we're being bombarded with at times. But as you say, that kind of process of self-regulation where we're noticing how we're feeling in that, and kind of seeing the bigger picture of what's happening or what might be happening, as well as having some of those experiences as well. And yes, it does take a lot of practice, and still not perfect at it by any means. But yeah, there can be a whole lot of other things that we can take in instead of being led down that path or led into that blame game, that can kind of start to take place, and it becomes all about the emotions for us, just as much as it comes like that, or as just as much as it's like that for our loved ones and the people that we work with as well.
Yeah.
Jenny, do you mind if I just jump back in quickly?
Sure.
Liz, who I'm co-leading a Family Connections course with at the moment, gave us a lovely quote last week, which is that blame is a way to discharge feelings of shame and disappointment. And I think it's always really useful to remember that very often in heightened emotion, blame is the quickest thing to latch onto, but there can be many other reasons underneath. And at the heart of it, the person shouting the blame at you is actually really hurting and really needs to be heard and acknowledged in that moment, rather than have the spout sort of taken as verbatim, because actually underneath it, there's probably a lot else that's more deeply personal to them.
Yeah. Yeah. I certainly find, I call it getting caught on the content, like almost not listening to the words and instead looking to the emotion. Because I don't know if you can add some more to this, Phoebe, but to me, it's often not that sometimes when people are really dysregulated, they don't even kind of know what they're saying or mean what they're saying, and it's not about the words. And if you try and address the words, then everybody's just going to get more dysregulated. Would you say that's true, Phoebe? What was your experience?
That's 100% true for me, because during a meltdown, when my sense of reality is all distorted, one of the most helpful things someone can do is validate my feelings without trying to dismiss them or pass judgment on me. In those moments, I just feel overwhelmed and understood. So hearing that my emotions are real and valid, even if my perception of the situation might be skewed, it can just provide more of a sense of safety for me. Tone of voice matters a lot in those moments. Calm, steady, and non-judgmental tones help me feel safer, while anything sharp or dismissive can just make things a whole lot worse, and I'm more likely to lash out even more in those moments. So it's also important everyone avoids saying I understand, because I don't think you understand how I'm feeling. And hearing that can make me feel even more misunderstood. And when I really need is just their full attention, gentle presence, and simple acknowledgement of my emotions. And it just helps if someone calmly acknowledges what I'm feeling, whether it's fear, anger, sadness, and just reassures me that it's okay to have those emotions. Hearing something like, I can see how upset you are and I'm here with me, helps me so much more than trying to explain or fix things. And someone's full attention is key. I just need to feel like they're fully present with me in that moment, and that will just help ground me and reducing the intensity of my emotions and allowing me to start separating the feelings from the reality. And it doesn't erase the meltdown completely. It just makes me feel less alone in it, which is what I need in that moment.
Yeah. Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. That was great. I think so. Okay, the next question we have, how can I validate? So this is again a composite question. How can I validate when I perceive their version of events to be untrue, made up, or exaggerated? I don't want them to interpret that my validating them means that I agree. I also don't want to invalidate myself by pretending to agree with something that I don't. Anyone want to volunteer on that one, or shall I pick someone?
I'll jump in.
Yay.
It doesn't give me a free pass to say or do destructive or harmful things. It just acknowledges why I feel a need to act that way and helping me better understand my impulses while also holding me accountable for my actions. So validation will just help to ground me a bit more, but it does not give me a free pass. So you're not saying, oh, if you're validating me, you're not saying that it's okay for me to act that way. You're saying my feelings of why I'm acting that way is completely valid and it's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Josh, have you got anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think it's really comes down to, we're looking when we're using validation to validate the valid parts. Not everything is valid. Not all behaviors, not all things that someone's doing in the moment are valid, but there are valid parts, and it is around those feelings, those emotions for people. There always tends to be a kernel of truth that we can find somewhere in that experience amongst the the problem things that are happening or that we're perceiving are happening. And we've kind of got to dig a little bit deeper. What is happening underneath, and find that kernel somewhere as well. And that is in the emotions and the experience of that other person, which can be very different from our own experience. And
a good question in that when you're trying to validate someone in that heightened state, is what am I missing? I call it becoming an emotion detective. You know, okay, I tried to validate that didn't work. What am I missing here? And maybe even asking the person what they're missing, what you're missing. Cheryl, what about for you?
Yeah, again, I think it's, as you've all said, it's not about the content of the argument, it's about the emotion behind it. And I used to try and bring my daughter down by beautiful logical arguments as to why she needn't think the way she thought, and then she wouldn't be so upset. And of course, it just inflamed things. And and I think also something that you mentioned there, Jenny, is that sometimes there's a seed of a really big emotion, and it needs an outlet, and the thing that's being vented about might not actually be the real underlying reason. And it's just not a time for logic, which I've tried and failed. I know it's not a time for logic. It's a time to be, gosh, you seem really upset about this, or tell me more, or that's not the right time to try and explain things away or offer an alternative point of view. It's a time to express your understanding that the person seems really upset or really heightened, and ask them to tell you more about it if they're in the zone part, if they're part of the process that they can.
That's great. Okay. Yeah, even just sort of saying, I mean, Phoebe, what would happen if someone would say to you something like, we see this event very differently, but I still want to help you, be there for you, or try to understand your point of view. Would that sort of, we're seeing it differently, would that feel invalidating to you, or, is it?
No, I feel like that would be like something nice to say, because not everyone sees everything the same. And although in the moment I don't realize that I'm not thinking clearly, I will eventually know that. So it's not invalidating at all, no.
Cool. Yeah, that's that thing of when a kid comes home from school and they're like, everybody hates me at school, nobody, and you want to go, well, it's not possible that everybody hates you. We're saying, wow, that sounds like you had a really tough day. Gosh, what happened at school today? Like, you don't address the logic of everyone hates you. You just go, okay, something went on down at school, let's find out what it was.
Yeah.
Yeah, not getting caught on the content. Yeah. Okay. All right. So what about when how do you validate when, like you are being abused, screamed at, maybe having cruel things being said to you?
You should take a step back for yourself, honestly. You're not going to give me any help if you're in an emotional state yourself, and if you're being abused, you're going to be in that emotional state. If you can keep a calm, leveled head and just say like, hey, I can't talk to you while you're treating me this way, I'm going to take a minute, and when I come back we can try and have a conversation about this, that would be good. But usually when someone says they're going to take a step away, as a person with BPD, my initial reaction will just be completely overwhelmed, and it will trigger rejection, abandonment, intense fear that you're going to leave me. My mind will race with all the self-doubt, questioning what I did wrong, whether you're leaving forever. And my emotional response will be very intense, because I interpret it as a personal rejection rather just a need for you to have your space, for you to get a level head. However, with time and self-awareness, I'm slowly learning to recognize that the request for space isn't the necessarily means to an end of a relationship. It's just an opportunity for me to practice self-soothing and remind myself that taking a step back isn't permanent or personal. It's just needed for the health of both individuals. So although it's difficult, you can't help me if you're in that emotional state yourself, and
Mm.
nobody should be abused, and it's no excuse.
Yeah. And I mean, you did DBT and learn, you know, your own distress tolerance, and you learn about validation and things like that
Yeah.
too. However, if the person who said I need to step away never came back, that would be invalidating, and you would stay emotionally dysregulated. Am I wrong?
Yeah.
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 So validation is an action as well. It's not just words.
Yeah.
Like you say that you're going to
It's-
come back, you know, you come back.
Yeah. So if you're like, it helps if you say like, oh, okay, I'm gonna go sit in another room, or I'm gonna go for a drive and take myself away for 10 minutes. And then they know that in 10 minutes you're coming back, but you have to actually show that you're going to come back in 10 minutes. And as time goes on with you needing to take time for yourself, I won't be as scared that you're not going to come back, because you've proven yourself time and time again that, hey, 10 minutes, they'll be back. Like, they just need to regulate themselves.
Yeah. Brilliant. Yeah, Josh,
I
go
think
ahead.
it probably raises a really important point around, you know, obviously the topic of this webinar is all about validation, but in the context of all the other things that we do learn in the Family Connections program, and as in Phoebe's case in DBT as well, it does come in the context of a lot of other different things that we sometimes need to do, taking that step back, which might, again, to the other person, if not done in a delicate way that does communicate something about why you need to do that, why you might need to press pause on a conversation, because you're acknowledging that you're having your own emotional reactions here, and you need to stop and take a pause. Then yeah, we can get caught up entirely in that idea of validation, feel like we just need to stay, and then get caught up ourselves in it all, like Phoebe was saying, which isn't going to be helpful for anyone. But we can still kind of validate and ask that permission to communicate, to press pause as well, so you can come back and probably next time around do that validation a little bit better the next time around as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Another good way to go into it as well is when you're wanting that time away and you want to create that boundary, you start off with something like, I love you. I will be like back, like, I love you. I'm upset right now. I will be back. And like a positive reinforcement, so that they know, like, okay, this person's not abandoning me. Like, it's, I care about you. I need to take a step back for a minute. I'm just not feeling like I can handle this conversation right now. I don't want to get overwhelmed and this to blow up some more. I'll be back in however long, or I'll be back soon. You can text me if you need me. But if you're obviously being abused, like, I don't want to be spoken to while we're both heightened right now. I love you, I care about you, and I'll be back.
Yeah. And saying I love you is not rewarding the behavior. You know, like some people may have grown up in families themselves where positive, caring statements were given as rewards, you know, instead of just as, you know, like, this is part of our family environment. We love each other, warts and all, you know. So it can be hard for people to do that if that's how they were raised. And, you know, there's nothing like having kids to reflect on your own upbringing, I guess. Yeah, Cheryl, did you have anything to add to that?
It's triggering a lot for me, but I think if we're talking about the validating when you feel that it's not true, I think is where we were. And I think in the early days when my daughter would throw a lot of things at me, that's how it felt to me in her heightened emotion, I would stay with her and try and go through the things she was throwing at me and try and explain why she didn't have to feel so bad, because I was really wanting to help her calm. But of course, I was just making it a whole lot worse. And I didn't know, at that point, I didn't know how to leave. And so I felt as if I was sort of caught in this cycle of being told everything was wrong with me, but also being needed to be there to hear all the things that were wrong with me. It was I didn't have the skills then to deal with that. And And these days, with having done Family Connections and having learnt a lot, I can, if I think my daughter still has, she has different recollections of some events than I do.
Mm.
And she'll retell a story in her perspective, and it's not as the way I remember it, but now I can more easily say, and it's a safer space between the two of us because we've both learned a lot of skills. So I can say, look, my darling, that's not exactly the way I remember it, but I can hear that sounds really traumatic for you. That must have felt blah-de-blah. Tell me more about it. So we're able to share two different versions of the same event and discuss the emotions around it rather than have to fight the details.
Yeah, you're not historians. Yeah, brilliant. Okay. All right. So we've got a couple of questions here about how do you respond, when you try to, this is about for teenagers or a young person, there's always got to come back to validation comments, or, a young person who's infuriated by any talk of feelings. To me, this sounds like these are questions that are a little bit about inaccurate expression, but I don't know, do you want to weigh in on that one, Josh?
Yeah, certainly. And yeah, I think sometimes you are met with a little bit of resistance, particularly early on when you're maybe trying out some of these things for the first time. It's a bit awkward, when you're learning to do something differently, maybe like validating the valid. But persistence does pay off in the long run. Once that accurate expression starts to come through from both sides around what you're trying to do when you're validating, which is support someone, usually someone that you love. In my case, it might be clients as well. But you're trying to support someone, and if you're validating and if you're trying again and again to do that, the tip is to try it again 3 times, validate, that you will start to get across that you are a supportive, trusting person, and it can start to evolve, and you can start to kind of tweak things in a way with the person that is on the other side of this transaction to make it kind of fit your relationship a little bit better, as well, and start to use language that you get familiar with over time, as well, as opposed to just maybe reverting exactly verbatim to some of the statements that we're suggesting as well, because it is about kind of acknowledgement of the language that that other person is using around their experience as well.
Phoebe, can you think of having that experience of someone trying to validate and not quite getting it right, and how was that for you?
Yeah, so I have had that situation a lot, and I've always ended up blowing up. Like, the main thing people say to me is they understand, and poof, I explode. But patience is super important. Even if it looks like I'm not hearing you, just stick with me. And instead of reacting to the intense stuff, I might just say, try and just reflect on how I'm feeling in that moment and just keep trying different ways. Not everything's going to work. Some things that work for me aren't going to work for another person. Some things that work for that person isn't going to work for me. But there are ways to be able to validate everyone. Like, if I'm lashing out, sounds like you're really angry right now and hurt right now. It just shows that you're focused on what I'm feeling, not the words I'm throwing. And I don't need you to say the perfect thing. I just need to vent sometimes, even if it sounds like a jumbled mess. Just saying I'm here for you can be just extremely powerful. And if words aren't working, you can validate me with actions, just sitting with me, nodding, holding my hand. If I'm in an emotional state where I can handle a hug works. Not always. Sometimes we don't want to be touched. But yeah, just saying like, I get this feels overwhelming right now, and that's totally okay. When things get too intense, it's really helpful in those situations.
One of the thoughts that I had while we were prepping for this webinar as well was a little bit of anticipatory validation can work, I think, too, like being aware of, I was saying at the beginning about people with autism, like being aware of sensory overload. Like if someone's come home from school, giving them, you don't have to have the blow up to get to the point where you're validating someone. It might be, that mind reading thing of, okay, you're home from school, why don't you just go to your room, really, a nice quiet place, go have a shower, do something that kind of gets that sensory overload, because it's not just people with autism, it's people with ADHD, it's people with that emotional sensitivity of BPD, that skinlessness. You just need to decompress from our incredibly stimulating world. So validation can be anticipatory as well, I think. Yeah. Okay.
Jenny, do you mind if I quickly add
Yeah,
something?
sure.
Just that I think my daughter did the DBT training and was quite articulate and emotionally savvy, a lot like Phoebe. And it's when I was learning skills at the same time she was learning skills, and my daughter's very bright, very perceptive, and it was alarmingly obvious to her when I was trying to use a skill, and sometimes she was better versed in them than I was. So I think being real was really important, just not trying to be great at a skill, but just saying, look, I'm really sorry. I love you. I seem to be saying things that are not falling well, but I really love you. Can you help me? Is there something I can do that would help? Not always trying to have the right answer, not always trying to be the person who helps, just actually letting her be the master of her own experience and actually know a lot about, at times more about it than I did when she was in DBT and I was starting to learn.
Brilliant. Yeah. That certainly sounds right. Okay, so there's one we've got here about sometimes my person will stare at me blankly and I feel that I'm not being heard. How can I get them to hear me? And yeah, I sort of, without being able to check in with the person that sent that one in, my sense of that this might be a sign of dysregulation, actually, that emotion, we talk about emotional dysregulation, which is losing control of our emotions. And it's not just explosive, it's not just a big thing, it can be an implosive shutdown. So if you're sort of getting a stare or a blank look or something like that, that might be a sign that they've dysregulated to the point where they've dissociated or zoned out. This is not a time to be making points. Yeah, I don't know, is that, Cheryl, have you ever sort of had that experience when you've been with your daughter?
Absolutely, yes. And in the beginning, I made all those mistakes and would think she was actually listening when she'd just shut down. She couldn't handle anymore. And once I understood that and was able to give her space, things worked a lot better. My daughter was very, I hope she won't mind me saying so, loud in her BPD. And I only realized some years into the process that it was highly likely that my son also had BPD, but the quiet kind, and he was internalizing all of his. And so I had to recalibrate that sometimes when I thought he was listening, he'd probably also shut down, but the difference wasn't so obvious. So I had to be much more finely tuned and, keep reminding myself, it's not my job to fix, it's not my job to tell or explain. I just need to listen and be there and, shut up sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah, and not invalidate yourself in that process. Yeah, you can validate, oh, Mom, I want to help. And it will be more effective if I don't help. What about you, Josh?
Yeah, I think in those moments, as you suggest, Jenny, that the timing is kind of key, and the timing will come you know, we're not, again, not looking to invalidate ourselves. The timing will come where you can communicate more effectively how you're feeling about a situation, but it's probably not the time to put the accelerator on that when, yeah, you're maybe met with, you know, not kind of intimately knowing that exact experience, but it does sound very much like, you know, someone's kind of, yeah, glazed over, zoned out, then there's no point just keep hammering away at that nail. You just kind of, you do have to step back and once again notice your urges to maybe want to say something, but then also temper that with, I'll have the time, but now's not the right time. I'm just going to be with this person and not bang my head against the wall, trying to communicate how I feel when it's probably not going to go in.
And that's got me thinking about that thing of that false sense of urgency around things. Like when someone has very intense emotions, whether it's ourselves or the person that we're facing from in whatever role, you can have this sense of, oh my God, it needs to be solved now. Whereas in actual fact, you know, unless it's sort of a life or death situation, it probably doesn't need to be fixed right now. I had a disagreement with a friend where I was accused of something pretty heinous, and it was potentially a friendship ending accusation. And luckily I went away in the middle of it, but it took me weeks to feel that I was going to be regulated enough to to have the conversation and to be able to validate my friend's point of view and hear her out, and you know, not be defensive. And but yeah, it took me weeks before I was prepared to have that conversation, because I needed to know that I would be calm. And you know, we sorted out the misunderstanding, and she came around to understanding my point of view, and I could see where she had misinterpreted things, and when she could see the evidence of what had happened, you know, she was calm. But if we had tried to solve it then and there, I think it would have ended our friendship. And good news is we're fine, we're back on track. So, you know, like timing, it doesn't have to be urgent, I think.
I guess the caveat, Jenny, this is with my clinician hat on, and I don't know how many maybe clinicians or other kind of mental health professionals we have in amongst the group tonight, but you kind of you know, on occasion, depending on what role you might be in, you kind of you've got the pressures from above, or you've got a time limited I guess space that you're working with people as well, and yeah, you do have those very real pressures to be, you know, pressing that accelerator and you know, taking things maybe a bit, or at least with you, how you've conceptualized how you might help someone. You're going off too quickly, but there are other ways, validating ways, that you can still support and help someone, that don't have to be maybe all the things that the powers from above are telling you or the textbooks are telling you. It's just being with someone and building that relationship. And the power of that is really underestimated sometimes in the clinical world as well.
Yeah, I'd say that's true.
And if I just can add, the thing that is urgent, of course, is the emotion. The emotion is huge and is filled with urgency. And I think it can be really easy for us to be led astray and think that the emotion is about the thing that the words are saying. But actually, the emotion is a big emotion, and that's the thing that needs dealing with right now, not the stuff, not the details.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you have any thoughts on that, Phoebe? Not to put you on the spot, but
No, that's okay. So I agree with everything you guys have said on that behalf, honestly.
good.
Yeah.
Well, it's validating to know we're on the right track. Okay. So we have a kind of a specific question here around how do you handle co-parenting with an ex-partner with BPD? I think that's you know, you're in that clinical space, Josh, you know, do you see sort of have any experience around that? I mean, I would recommend that this isn't a BPD question. This is a go-to, you know, like in WA, for example, we have separating parents courses and which are all about turning the focus onto children. And, you know, most parents do want to put their kids first. So learning how to do that. And those programs will be free. But I don't know, did you have any thoughts around that, Josh?
Yeah, I guess on the theme of validation, you know, when you're maybe in that co-parenting arrangement. I'm not a parent myself, or you know, so no kind of expert in this family space necessarily, but it would probably that validation could lead to probably the collaboration at that point of, you know, what do you want as parents, or to see your child grow, or you know, to be loving parents. What does that look like? Being curious for each other, if there might be some different perspectives on that as well. But validation can kind of really be the you know, when there is, I guess, maybe some differences in perspectives, there can kind of bring them together, and you can kind of maybe have some shared goals around what you might like to work towards, or what you might want the co-parenting to look like, essentially.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, so we have another question here about, you know, if a person's feeling really down and feeling bad because of a bad choice that they've made, well, that's a judgment, but you know, perhaps, yeah, let's just call it a bad choice for brevity. Is it wise to validate without referring to the original bad choice, especially if that choice has been made several times in the past? Cheryl, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I've had my own share of experiences of this, having teenagers with BPD, and it's never worked to say that was a really bad choice, don't do that again. It's always just accelerated everything. And as a parent, it's really hard to watch your child go into something that you are fairly certain is going to turn out badly for them and hurt them. It's not easy to watch, but I think that's the case for any parent, BPD or not. You know, no human being is immune from making dumb choices. And I think for me, my daughter will know intrinsically whether she made the right choice or not once she experiences the fallout. Whether she goes down that route again, it's got to be her choice. And the best way I can support her in that is just to let her talk it through and let her talk about the consequences that were there, and maybe ask some gentle, slightly leading questions about how she might want to approach it if it would happen again. But no advice, no saying I told you so, because inside she'll be knowing that already. She made the choice. She's got the consequences. She'll know. The best thing I can do is listen and be there for her. Yeah. Consequences which invalidate us can be a really great natural learning thing, isn't it? Yeah. You know? And as a parent, you know, you get a lot of parenting advice when you have children with BPD, and consequences was always the one. Give them more consequences. They shouldn't do that. And I knew that that was actually the worst thing I could do, that was an incentive device. And that, you know, when my daughter was little, I described it as I need to give her a very long leash, which isn't a very nice thing to say. You know, I wouldn't say it as a grown-up, but she needed a lot of space, because any brakes I tried to put on her would only make it worse and would cause rifts between us. And she's strong, she's feisty, she's making her own mistakes and working it out her own way, and it's really hard to watch. But all I can do is love her and be there for her, and she'll learn.
I should clarify. When I was saying consequences, I was meaning natural consequences. Yeah. Not imposed consequences, not punishments imposed by a parent, but like natural consequences. Like if you stay up gaming all night and you have to go to work the next day, Josh, the natural consequence is that you're going to be tired and have a miserable day at work. So yeah, natural consequences as opposed to someone punishing you.
Indeed. And Jenny, I think the reason for me that I bring that up is because as a parent, I felt quite often that I was being judged, you know, that I
you were
should
being invalidated.
put in consequences, but other parents would say to me, give her consequences, then she won't do it. And it didn't work. That wasn't the way it worked here. And so that's, I guess, the sore point for me, that I went through those judgments. But yeah, she will learn from her own consequences. She's strong, she's intelligent, she's feisty. She's going to do it her own way. I love her. It's hard to watch her hurt, but she's her own person.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that the funny thing about validation, especially in kind of the clinical space or in counseling work, is that it kind of allows that open discussion and for those natural consequences to kind of start to reveal themselves naturally, rather than you kind of saying as a clinician or a loved one that something bad or that this is terrible for you. That no, by kind of just acknowledging the experience of someone, those things kind of start to unravel and reveal themselves pretty quickly if you're validating someone in that process as well. And then they can then understand what's happening for them a bit better, and you can work together to solve those issues, those consequences.
Yep. Phoebe, have you got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so like if I was to stay up all night or whatever for like a week straight and I had work the next day and I was super tired, and if someone went to me and they were like, oh, you did it to yourself, it would upset me an extreme amount, because like I know I did it to myself. I'm not, I know,
Stupid.
yeah. But it's more like, oh no, I understand why you're tired. Like, yeah, you were up all night. It's not saying, oh yeah, it's a good thing to be up all night, but it's not also saying like, stop doing that, because I'll stop.
Which you would.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily like saying like, you don't have to validate it to a point like, oh yes, you're doing the right thing, but also don't like throw it in my face like, oh well, duh, like yeah, you're going to be tired, or you hung out with bad people and you know they're not the best people, but like you did it to yourself. You got yourself in that situation. Like I'm aware of that. I already feel not great about it. Like
yeah. Understanding that. And, you know, like if you're a teenager, you know, you can validate, you can say, hey, hanging out, you know, I know it's really hard when you're a teenager, you want to fit in, they seem really cool, it's really easy to get sucked in. And, you know, how about, you know, what can we do so that you can get yourself out? You can call on me to help you get yourself out of that situation, for example. What would work for you? That might be.
Instead of just, you know, you did it to yourself.
Yeah, what did you expect?
Yeah.
Awesome. All right, so we put the validation one up. Oh yeah, does validation have to be positive and encouraging? What if someone is feeling stressed or anxious? Phoebe, can I get you on that one again?
So if someone's like, if I'm super stressed or whatever, you don't have to be like, oh, you don't have to be like, why are you stressed? You have no reason to be stressed. It can just be like, oh, I understand why you would be stressed. Like, I'm trying to think of an example.
A webinar. Doing
about
a webinar.
this. Like, I was very nervous before coming into this, and if someone had said to me like, oh, you don't have to be nervous, you'll do great. Like, it doesn't have to be positive. It's more like, I completely understand why you would be nervous. You haven't done anything like this before. You're public speaking. It's being recorded. Like, and just validate exactly what is happening. Like, it's not good. It's not bad validation. It's just, this is the experience.
Yeah. And cheerleading can be invalidating, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, oh, you're doing great. Like, what if I'm not great? Like,
Yeah. I think we're getting to the end of our questions. Yeah. We did have a variation of this one. But what should I do if my validation is met with rejection or more anger? For example, I know how hard it must be for you, and the response is you don't, or you just say that, but you don't really mean it. Have you had the experience, Phoebe, of someone learning to validate around you and them, misstepping or something? What did that?
so I've only like my partner has only recently gotten good at the whole validating thing. It
Mhm.
used to be exactly like the question asked. But it's just being here, trying different ways of validation, not trying to overstep the boundaries. It's overwhelming right now, and that's okay. Like simple things. But if I'm getting upset, like, I understand, no, you don't, or something along those lines, it's maybe trying, I don't understand your experience. I'm sorry you've had to go through that, but I understand that you're feeling this way because of this happened to you. So it's not understanding what I've gone through, but it's understanding why I felt like that would be a better way of saying it.
Yeah. Well, of course you would feel frightened if you've had that experience. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not only natural, anybody would feel that way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cheryl, did you have something to add there?
What I would say is that, well, in my experience and in many of the people I know in this lovely BPD world, often the person who has BPD is, especially if they've done something like the DBT training, is extremely emotionally literate. And I think when we are learning to validate, we can get caught up in trying to say the right thing. And sometimes it can just sound that bit formulaic, which is not what the person who's in heightened emotion needs to hear. And look, so almost by definition, someone with BPD is really highly tuned to emotions. And if we get it wrong, if the tone's wrong, they'll know instantly. And because that's an excruciating, wonderful and difficult sensitivity for someone with BPD. And I with my daughter, I just got to the point of saying, like, if it didn't land well, I just say, look, I really love you. I really care about you. I'm sorry my words haven't been right yet. I don't quite know what the words are, but I'm here for you. I care about you. And if you can help me, if you tell me that was wrong, I'd love you to tell me how I could help. I don't have to be the expert on it. She can actually be the expert on it and help me as she starts to learn her skills. She can tell me what works for her.
Yeah, definitely.
It just feels more honest sometimes than trying out a formula and getting it wrong. But it's hard when we're learning.
Yeah, that's right. And Josh, you had something?
Yeah, it can be really, really hard to be on the other side of that you don't understand statement. And we can keep trying. We can keep trying. And I don't think there's ever that 100% understanding that ever comes from knowing exactly someone else's experience. But I think validation is really powerful in that it is that attempt to understand, or even that acknowledgement sometimes that, okay, yeah, right now, as you were saying, Cheryl, right now I don't have the right words, or right now I don't understand, and that can be okay as well, I think, and can be validating. A statement I kind of sometimes introduce when someone is having this emotional meltdown. I can't even imagine how that would feel, and that acknowledgement that no, I am a little bit vulnerable right now in that as well, and giving yourself over to not understanding is okay.
Okay.
It also gives us the opportunity to be curious. You know, if we're getting it wrong and we don't know, we can ask.
Yeah. And curiosity is so powerful. It's as powerful to validate. We need to be curious. And I feel like curiosity is the opposite of judgment. You know, judgment, the door's closed. I've passed judgment. There is no more investigation here. Whereas if you're curious, connection's ongoing, isn't it? Yeah. The last question that we had was about, you know, what if someone's starting to talk about a negative situation and then they sort of spiral into all the other times that this thing happened and they feel like it's sort of, I guess, going down a rabbit hole where they want to stop that and still be validating. Any thoughts around that one?
In my
Yeah.
experience, it's maybe the story isn't the point, maybe the emotion is the point. And maybe the story is the vehicle to get the words, the emotions out. And if I've heard the story 17 times and it's a blame of me, I need to learn that it's not about the story. It's about whatever, there's something underneath, there's an emotion that needs to be released. And if I can sit with it, it's clearly the vehicle, and it's a necessary vehicle for what needs to be got out.
Yeah, that's it. Anyone want to add anything more to that? Because we've got 15 more minutes and I don't know, I haven't been able to follow what's going on in the chat. So I might ask Liz if there's anything that we haven't covered that you think a question that might work for us there. I can ask you to unmute. And
Yep.
Stan, can you spotlight Liz for us?
Okay. Just trying to scroll back here. Not
Yeah.
loading.
Okay. Yep.
There was a question or two around breaking boundaries and the carer feeling somewhat manipulated by boundaries being broken and trying to validate through that. And so I've said they're two separate things, really. What would you say about that, Cheryl, Phoebe, Josh?
In my experience, if I set a boundary, my daughter viewed it as something to be broken as soon as possible. And she needed me to respect her. She needed me to give her a lot of space. And she needed to work things out her own way. And I had to learn that that was her way. That was what was important to her. And that me trying to corral her just made her feel shut in, made her feel not respected. And that even though, you know, some not good things happened as a result of her experimenting, there was a lot of damage, but she needed to do it her way. And there was, if I got in her way, it would have been a lot worse.
I've just found the full question. It was, how can you manage a situation when a teen is heightened and wants something that breaks a boundary? When they threaten violence or self-harm, if you don't allow their request, even when you validate their emotions in the situation.
It's
So
really hard.
for me myself, if I ever threatened self-harm or further, it wasn't a threat. Sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah, I think we've got someone's, I just need to mute someone. There we go.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, so if I ever threatened self-harm or further, it wasn't me trying to manipulate the situation. It was, I very much was like, I am going to do this if I'm not helped in this moment. I've had a lot of hospital visits. For some people, it could be a manipulation tactic, and I understand 100% why it would come off that way, but it's never to be taken unseriously. It's always, for me, been like, if I'm saying I'm going to do this, I really am going to or am wanting to do this. And boundaries have always been really hard for me personally to follow. Like if someone sets a boundary with me, broken. But whereas for me, if I set a boundary, I expect others to follow it. And I understand completely that's not fair, and that's something I've worked on. So you can't really validate in that, but you can validate, like, if there was an example, like, I can't think of an example, but you can validate like the feeling again, but not the breaking the boundary, but why they would want to break that boundary, like why they want that certain thing.
Yeah. Yeah, with the we call them DB teen groups, which are groups where an adolescent, so 14 to 18-year-old, and a parent or permanent carer come to the group and learn the skills alongside each other. And the whole unit in that is called the middle path, which is trying to get away from those really polarized, I want to stay out all night with my friends, I shouldn't have to come home on the weekend, I should be able to stay at my friend's place, you know. And you're like, no, no, I want you home. You know, it's about finding a middle path around those things, you know, being dialectical about it, being, you know, validating, yeah, I get it. Of course you want to spend your time, you're a teenager, you want to spend all your time with your friends. That is understandable. And my job as a parent is to help you do the things you don't want to do, like finish school. And, you know, and how you know, how can we make this work for us? You know, that sort of but I think, is it fair to say that we also encourage people to work on their relationship, you know, so that you've actually got that place of trust from which you can ask for a boundary to be respected.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Jenny, can I just hop in there with my experience
Sure.
with my daughter when she was young to middle teens? You know, if I tried to stop her from going out, she'd just go anyway. I mean, I'd think she was in bed and she'd have climbed through her window and gone. And, you know, there's usually a way for someone to break a boundary that you want to set as a parent. And I think it just adds an unnecessarily adversarial aspect to a relationship that's already quite emotionally charged. And for all the difficulties and traumas we had, my daughter and I often had a very good, close talking relationship. We can both talk about emotions. And so if she did break a boundary, say, or, you know, climb out of the window at 3 o'clock in the morning and something happened that hurt her and upset her, we were able to talk about it. And she was able to share with me her feelings. So, you know, I'm really sad that she wanted to take things that far. But if I'd set boundaries, she'd have gone across them anyway. But we could talk about it. And that was a bonus.
Josh,
There's
did
another
you have
question.
to add to that? Sorry.
Nope, fine.
Yeah, it was probably just an extension of what you were suggesting, Jenny, around this idea of balance and the fact that kind of these two competing things, you know, maybe it's the late night or you know, whatever boundary or limit it is that you're kind of looking to try and negotiate, these two things pulling at each other the entire time. You can kind of, with validation, acknowledge why that might be the want or desire of the other person, while at the same time acknowledging and self-validating the things that you need to do. Set the limits. Limits are flexible. Boundaries are pretty rigid and adversarial, as you say, Cheryl. But we can still bring them in a more effective way and in a more balanced way, so that the conversations can still be had, and the shared understanding and the accurate expression of both your needs and the other person's needs can be worked on. And it's a push and pull, and it's always going to be a push and pull, a really difficult push and pull. But there's hope with this idea of balance as well.
Sure, absolutely. Liz, you had another question for us.
Yes. Are there any suggestions for how to deal with the fatigue? I find the effort of validation quite stressful, given that validation, in my experience, doesn't seem to be a two-way street. Self-soothing seems to increase distance, and therefore, while good for survival, is counterproductive in building closeness and trust.
Yeah, I think this is, like, if I can quickly say something, you know, I think this is where self-validation becomes really important. That, you know, while somebody is lacking in skills, and that's the DBT stance, is that that when someone has such a sensitive system, they need different skills. You know, there are skills that are necessary to manage that emotionally sensitive system, and until they have it, they're not going to be able to validate you. So, you know, don't look for water in the desert. Yet, that's a yet. It's not a never, it's a yet. And, you know, do find other places to be validated, whether that's, you know, carer support groups. On the BPD Foundation website that's been shared, you'll find carer support groups, and, you know, they'll have, you know, you can be validated by other parents or other partners going through what you're going through, and feel you're well that way. And, you know, in time, you know, you will have a relationship where you validate each other. It does come. I've seen it so many times, and it fills my heart with joy when I do. Yeah. Anything else? Anyone got anything more to add to that? I sort of
I'd
jumped into
just
that
like
one.
to, if I can, I'd just like to validate the question, because I know I remember, you know, with my daughter, they'd been really tumultuous, challenging years, a lot of very traumatic stuff to deal with for both of us. And I felt as if I'd turned myself inside out, done everything I possibly could. And I finally found Family Connections and discovered that it was all on me, and that I had to learn all these things. And I remember a period of almost anger, just, what, do I have to be a saint? What about her? You know,
It's not fair.
because it is really hard. But actually, look, that is, you know, it's radical acceptance, isn't it? It is really hard. So what are we going to do? And validation is really helpful. And as you say, Jenny, we need to find other ways for self-care, because we value this person and we want to build a relationship. And if we've got the capacity to start now, then we'll start now, and hopefully they'll have a bit more capacity in time.
Yeah. Phoebe, did you have any thoughts around that, or?
I think you just have to continue to validate yourself. If you yourself don't feel validated, you're not going to do a great job validating someone else. You have to take care of yourself, and it is tiring. As someone with BPD, I have tired my mum out for my entire life. She's had to put in a lot of work to understand me and learn how to help me and validate me. It's still an ongoing process sometimes, but I know she's trying her best. And yeah, you just have to take care of yourself, because it is quite tiring.
Yeah.
Have we got time for one more question, Jenny?
Yeah, we do. We do.
What does it mean that the person disassociates?
Oh, what does that mean? Yes. Okay. So that's disassociation can happen when in a situation of emotional overwhelm. It's basically a fight, flight, or freeze response. It's the freeze response. It's this situation is too much for me. I just need to disconnect from all my sensations, my thoughts, my awareness in order to get through. It's a defensive mechanism, and yeah, and if you think about people with BPD being really sensitive, then their dissociation can be triggered by things that perhaps would not be overwhelming for us. So that can be difficult to understand. Is that a fair explanation, Josh? You got anything more to add to that, or?
Yeah, I did think about that earlier when we had that that question around, like, kind of what can you do when someone's dissociating, and I probably wouldn't do it in a clinical setting, but in terms of yeah, it is that kind of, you know, moving away from the present moment, if you will, away from kind of that emotional feeling, that emotional pain, escaping it, your body automatically starting to escape it, and leave the room. But you can maybe bring someone back from dissociating. It might be, you know, a hand on their hand, or a hug, or something kind of more physical to know, you know, for the other person to know that you're there and where you are, and that you're connected in that space as well, and then you're in a space together, you're in that experience together, and start to kind of ground with some more physical validation there. But yeah, again, context dependent, that type of response as well. But yeah, bringing someone back from dissociation, yeah, can be challenging, and doesn't necessarily work with words.
Yeah. Phoebe, I mean, is that something that you've experienced, being dissociated in a time of high stress?
Yeah, when I get extremely overwhelmed or very emotional, I call it shutting down. I understand the BPD stare. I get the BPD stare where it's like glazed over eyes, like, I don't hear you. You could be right here. Nothing you say is going into my head, my brain. I hear nothing you say. I don't see anything. I'm just there, and nothing feels real at the time. Like, I could look down at nothing seems real. Reality is completely gone. And I'm just there staring, shut down. I can be brought back, like Josh said, if someone is to touch me or hug me or hold me, it will bring me back into the moment. But yeah, it's just when I get extremely overwhelmed, overstimulated, upset, I'm zoned out. I'm not there. I'm no longer with you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you try and someone will, but if they have never seen it before and you're ignoring them, they'll be like, talk to me. And some people get to a point of like yelling at you, like, why are you ignoring me? Why aren't you talking to me? And I will go from dissociated to complete hysterics. Like, it'll bring me out, but now I'm so distraught that you're not getting anything from me. And it'll be, I'm shut down, but distraught at the exact same time. So it's kind of like you have to be extremely gentle with them when they're like that.
Well, that's great advice. That's really great advice. Well, we've hit 6:30, and I've just been scanning through the comments. You have so many fans now, Phoebe. You're the star of tonight. Thank you so much for bringing, you know, your client perspective, your lived experience perspective, because the other thing I think that people, you know, before getting their own help, and perhaps before their person's getting help, it can be really hard to connect to hope, and you are this beaming example of hope. So thank you for sharing your light with us. That's been really fantastic to have you on the panel tonight.
And thank you for having me on here. I genuinely appreciate it, because I would love to be able to help people. So thank you, Josh, for reaching out to me, and you guys for having me on here, because anything to help people who have been in similar situations to me, really.
Yeah, no, trust me, you've helped. And same to you too, Cheryl. Thank you so much for sharing, you know, your experience and the view from the other side of the tunnel. I think that's the thing that's really been really great to hear. And yeah, and Josh, for your perspective as a clinician and as a and as someone who's loved someone with emotional sensitivity. Yeah, I've really enjoyed hearing from everyone tonight, and also from what we've seen in the chat as well, and from and thank you to everyone who've submitted questions. Your questions have helped everybody as well. So yeah, and I think hopefully when we put this video up on YouTube, if anyone wants to make a donation to any ABPD, so we can continue to get Family Connections groups up and running, then and if you want to join a Family Connections group, there will be a link. I don't know if it'll be in the video or if it'll be in the comments, but it'll be there. So yeah, please let's keep it going. Right. Don't know if you wanted to add anything, Stan, or are we all good? I don't know where Stan's gone. Have we lost him?
Yeah, no apologies. I was just working in the chat there, trying to say thank you to as many people as possible, because there's some fantastic comments and everything you've just done. That it's been so inspirational, and I want to thank the panel myself and Liz and you, Jenny, for your time. So thank you very much. We will in the next few days upload the video. So if you've registered, you'll have access to that as well. But please do donate if you can. It does help us with being able to deliver our family connections programs to our extensive waiting list around Australia. So thank you.